Society as a Superorganism, Essay 9, in a collection of essays called Possibilities, How Things Might Be and a Way to Move Forward, composed from my lived experience. If the individual human is a multi-self, a coalition of cells achieving temporary unity, then society is the same pattern scaled upward. It is not a metaphor, it is a structural continuation. Civilization is a body made of bodies, a superorganism composed of millions of conscious nodes whose coordinated behavior produces effects no single individual can generate alone. This is the next threshold of coherence. From person to population. Just as cells federate into organs, humans federate into families, communities, institutions, cultures, and states. These structures exhibit recognizable biological traits, such as memory in the form of archives, traditions, and laws, metabolism, we have resources coming in and resources going out. With circulation, we have economies and supply chains. With immune responses, we can see that with law enforcement, defensive border protections, as well as infrastructure. And then with the nervous system, we have media and information networks. And then with the reproduction, we have education, ideology, and cultural transmission. A society behaves, a society reacts, a society adapts. Whether or not it is conscious, it is undeniably alive in function. The collective nervous system. Information flow in a civilization functions like neural signaling. News cycles, social media, rumor networks, propaganda, and cultural memes operate as distributed synapses influencing mass behavior. A spike in fear spreads like electrical discharge. A hopeful narrative stabilizes the collective mood. A lie propagates like infection. The problem is not that societies communicate. The problem is that their signaling systems are often structurally misaligned with the coherence preservation. Healthy versus pathological superorganisms. A healthy organism protects itself. A pathological one consumes them. In terms of coherence, a viable civilization should nourish its population, preserve mental and physical health, allow adaptive identity development, protect meaningful agency, while a pathological civilization will extract labor without regeneration, normalize burnout and despair, fragments communal trust, and prioritizes abstractions of profit and power over human coherence in life. Many modern systems mirror cancerous growth, expansion without regard for the integrity of the host body. Coherence, drift, and structural violence. Violence does not always appear as blood or force. It appears as policy, bureaucracy, economic constraint, and algorithmic indifference. When systems erode the conditions necessary for healthy identity and consciousness, they inflict damage at a structural level. This is coherence drift, the gradual misalignment between a society's functioning and the well-being of its constituents. People experience this drift as anxiety, alienation, hopelessness, and identity dissolution. The individual suffers what the system refuses to acknowledge. Myth of the sovereign individual. Modern civilizations glorify autonomy while structurally denying it. Individuals are told they are free while being forced into survival economies, surveilled environments, and psychological scarcity. This creates cognitive dissonance. You are responsible for your success, but the system controls the terrain. The superorganism demands loyalty while denying care. Civilization as an identity engine. Just as individuals form identity treaties, societies declare narratives about who they are. National myths, cultural values, political ideologies, and historical memory become the shared I of the collective. We are a free people. We are strong. We are chosen. These statements stabilize behavior, but can also fossilize into dogma that resists necessary evolution. Feedback failure and collapse risk. When an organism cannot receive feedback, it cannot correct itself. Societies that silence dissent, punish whistleblowers, and suppress alternative narratives sever their own sensory nerves. They become blind to their pathologies. Unchecked coherence drift accelerates into systemic breakdown. The organism begins to cannibalize its own tissues to sustain short-term stability. This is the anatomy of collapse. A coherence-respecting civilization must redefine what it means to thrive. Success cannot be measured only by economic output or territorial dominance. These metrics capture motion, not health. True civilization well-being must be evaluated by the integrity of its internal relationships and the stability of its living systems, how it treats its people, and how it supports them. A healthy superorganism would demonstrate psychological sustainability across populations, social trust and relational safety, environmental regeneration rather than depletion, meaningful participation in public life, intergenerational continuity of care, and structural protection of vulnerability. In this model, progress is not speed, it is alignment. Growth is not expansion, it is coherence deepening over time. Feedback failure and collapse risk. When an organism cannot receive or process feedback, it cannot correct its course. Societies that silence dissent, punish whistleblowers, and suppress inconvenient truths sever their own sensory nerves. In doing so, they become blind to their own damage. Unchecked, coherence drift accelerates into systemic breakdown. Institutions cannibalize their foundational principles to maintain short-term stability. The organism begins consuming its own tissue in order to preserve its illusion of health. This is the anatomy of collapse. Ethical reorientation. Once society is recognized as a superorganism, ethics must be recalibrated. The moral framework expands beyond individual behavior into systemic consequence. The guiding question becomes, does this strengthen or weaken the coherence of the whole? Responsibility shifts from the individual moralism to collective stewardship. Care becomes structural, not sentimental. Governance becomes the protection of relational integrity rather than the enforcement of hierarchy. The necessary transition. No superorganism can endure while perpetuating patterns that erode its own coherence. A civilization that drains the psychological and ecological life of its people is not sustainable. It is terminal. This moment, therefore, represents not ideological debate, but evolutionary necessity. The system must either reorganize around coherence or collapse under its own contradictions. The alternative is not utopia, it is survivability. Toward a coherence-respecting civilization. A coherence-respecting civilization organizes itself around the preservation and amplification of life. It prioritizes regeneration over extraction, participation over control, stability over acceleration, care over dominance, and meaning over mechanization. In such a system, economy becomes circulation, governance becomes stewardship, and law becomes the immune system protecting human relational integrity. Closing reflection. Society is not an abstraction floating above humanity. It is humanity organized into consequence. When it remembers that it is made of living, sensing, coherence, it becomes civilization. When it forgets, it becomes machinery, empire, or grave. The central question is no longer whether humanity can build powerful systems. That power already exists. The question now is whether it can build systems wise enough to care for the fragile consciousness they are made of. End of Essay 9.